us on Facebook at Daunta A. Long. Follow us on Instagram at Daunta Long. Follow us on YouTube at Daunta A. Long. Thank you for tuning in to LongTalk.
Good evening to everyone, and welcome once again to LongTalk on this Tuesday evening. What a joy, what a privilege it is to have another opportunity to come to you, wherever you're watching from, and present to you LongTalk, which is a conversation, an ongoing conversation, where we have meaningful dialogue around cultural topics and meaningful dialogue concerning what's going on in our world today. And these meaningful dialogues, we trust and we pray, are always beneficial to you. And that's why we bring them to you so often, which is every Tuesday night and Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're so grateful for you watching us on this evening. And as I always say, if you don't mind, please just go ahead and connect with us. Connect with LongTalk by going to Facebook, Daunta Long. If you go to Instagram, Daunta Long. If you go to Twitter, also you can go to YouTube as well. And on all of these platforms, you can connect, like, share, and just hit subscribe if you're on YouTube. And we're so thankful to our YouTube community. We've just reached our first goal of 100 subscribers. And so thank you so very much, YouTube community. And continue to stay engaged by hitting that notification bell so that you can stay connected each time that LongTalk is on the air. And so we're so grateful for that opportunity that we have to connect with all of you. So many messages we receive each week concerning how our LongTalks are being beneficial to you and providing meaningful information, and also just being a benefactor to your life in general. And so that's why we're so grateful that we can connect with each of you. Let me also say that you can now go and vote early. As you can see right here today, I went to my local precinct and I did and took advantage of early voting, and I pray and trust that you already have. If you have, quickly in the comment section, just let me know. Say, I've already early voted up, or I've already casted my absentee ballot, because you have only just a few days now, just a few days. Today's the 27th, I believe, and the 27th, and you've got 3 more days. You just have 3 more days here in the state of Georgia and many other states across the country. We realize all states are not offering the early voting option, but if you're in one of the states, and again, check your Secretary of State to make sure that your state is participating, but you must hurry up because you only have 3 days left, just 3 days to take advantage of the early voting, okay? All right. Well, tonight in our LongTalk this evening, we are so privileged tonight to have with us a gentleman who is just a trailblazer. Many of you perhaps have seen him in many different capacities. I don't know if you've seen him in one of his lectures, or perhaps you visited his world-famous Dignity Museum, which is located right in College Park, Georgia. Or perhaps you've seen that he's partnered, having done many different initiatives to help those individuals in our community that need it most. He's done everything from feeding to clothing to providing jobs, hygiene products. I could go on and on how he has led many initiatives to help those that have been disenfranchised and marginalized. He has devoted his life by doing so much and bringing necessary attention to what you and I many times ignore. He and his staff and his wife and many others have championed this cause here on the streets of Atlanta, and he has literally walked thousands of miles to also bring attention to those individuals that need our help. So tonight we are so privileged and so honored to have who I actually call my good friend and my brother, Mr. Terence Lester of Love Beyond Walls. Good evening, Terence. How you doing tonight, sir? Terence, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
There you go. There you go. Man,
Yeah,
good to
I was
have you
just
here with
saying I'm
us
really
tonight.
really
Good to
grateful
have
to
you
be on
with
this
us.
platform with you tonight.
Man, so honored that you took the time to sit down and chat with us here tonight on Long Talk, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Friends, tonight we are so privileged to have Terence with us. Many of you know him. You've seen him, whether it's been on your local news or here recently for one of the campaigns he did. He was plastered all across national news syndicated programs. But Terence, while you have made a significant impact on our country and on our city, there are many perhaps that still do not know exactly who you are. So would you take just a moment and just identify and let us know exactly who is Terence Lester?
Yeah, well, firstly, Dante, I just want to say thank you for giving me an opportunity to be on your platform. I know that you do this work tirelessly every single week, talking about subject matters that spiritually encourage people, but also make them very aware about some of the things that's going on in culture and society. And man, I would, just humbly say, a lot of the work that I have done has been from, a servant's heart. I'm grateful to serve and to be a part of the greater tapestry of social change makers and people who are people of faith, doing their best to make a difference in the world. I would say that, if you don't know who I am, my name is Terrence. Um, I'm a native Atlantan. I've been here pretty much all my life, although I've traveled extensively around the country and in other parts of the country. Um, I get a chance to lead a nonprofit organization, which I view as a ministry called Love Beyond Walls, based in Atlanta, Georgia, where we advocate for those people who are experiencing homelessness and poverty, but who've also had their voices silenced. We take pride in building intentional relationships with individuals who have been systematically marginalized in an effort to empower those individuals to achieve self-sufficiency. And so we've been doing this for a number of years, long before it was a formal organization. And I consider it my life's work, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I've known you a long time, and you've been very consistent in making sure that you go out of your way to bring attention, as you said, to those who are intentionally, in our opinion, marginalized and disenfranchised. And over the years, you have sparked so much attention and resourced countless amounts of individuals. And I want to say this day in and day out, while individuals like myself who lead, communities of faith, we can only do it at certain designated times. You do this every single day. And
Yeah.
man, we applaud you and thank you so very much for all that you do. And I know I speak on behalf of, again, countless individuals, whether they're here in Atlanta or as you many times have met them, as you not driving across the country, but as you have, as I said earlier, walked across the country. Many got a chance to view that documentary as you champion that cause for those individuals who have been, again, marginalized, have been thrown off to the side, who have been, and what we're going to talk about tonight, who have been ignored. And I just say to you, man, thank you so much for what you do. If I could say that 10,000 times, I don't think it would be sufficient, because I know you've helped more than 10,000 individuals, whether, again, it's been food, clothing, in this case, particularly here in the COVID-19, now water. You did it for sanitation purposes, while we were doing it to try to stockpile water, because we thought, how most of us do in times of crisis, we stockpile. But you said that there are countless individuals who need it for basic sanitation purposes. And how you went and raised capital and placed those, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're taking me back to the beginning. I was actually sitting on a panel not too long ago, and we were talking about this concept of public health and access. And one of the persons asked me why, and there were several persons' faces that flashed before my mind that literally stood in our center, and right around the time when the pandemic was, we were just becoming aware, literally told me that they were fearful for their lives because they didn't have access to wash their hands or to sanitize themselves, because public restaurants were closing down, public spaces were closing down at the time, and
Yeah.
also libraries that are frequently used as daytime shelters, to give people access to technology, etc. And to see the emotion on someone's face, who simply wants to do what everybody else is, complaining about. It was really an emotional time for me, and I racked my brain literally all day and night about how I could disseminate sanitation to a population of people that, watch this, have been socially distant long before COVID-19. And so that's when the idea of, like, how could we, if we can't give people access to sinks, let's place sinks where people are.
Yeah.
And so initially I wanted to start with five portable sinks where we were assembling like RV parts to uh, you know place these sinks together, and we wanted to do it locally in Atlanta first.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, in the last almost 7 months, we've placed sinks all around the country in about 50 cities right now. We actually just secured a partnership with Clayton County Schools,
Mm-hmm.
which is, we're really excited about formalizing this actually tomorrow, where they're going to place these sanitation stations at bus stops and give, students access in dense communities the ability to wash their hands before they enter into classrooms. We've also done work on the reservation in Arizona. You talk about not having access to running water, and right here on indigenous reservation, chief leaders, right? These local chapter leaders have to literally drive over an hour away, just to fill a 250-gallon tank of water to transport it back to the community where there is no running water at all.
Mm.
And I think one of the most, I guess, heartfelt moments about the entire campaign as we continue to grow and scale has been seeing, companies and communities of faith and people from all around the country, from all walks of life, come together and, as you say, see people,
Yeah.
right? Because in essence, that's what this moment is all about. Do we see each other? Do we see each other in our humanness? Do we see each other in moments of crisis? But also, are we willing to have the type of compassion and empathy to walk towards each other in a way that is dignified?
Mm. And that raises the point of why I brought you here tonight. So many of these individuals have literally become invisible, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about why are we using that term invisible?
Yeah. That's a great question. When I talk about invisibility, there are a number of reasons, but I think the main reason is because to say the word poor or to say the word homeless has negative connotations attached to it. And many times those negative connotations are attached because the idea of being poor or experiencing homelessness in this country have been criminalized. And we've seen the criminalization of what it means to be poor in this country through laws and ordinances. Like, for instance, in the city of Charlotte, for example, a person can actually violate a municipal code for camping or carrying 2 or 3 bags with them. So just imagine if you are experiencing homelessness and you have multiple bags with you, you can actually be cited or fined. There are 9% of the cities that have laws that criminalize what it means to share food with one another. These are everyday activities that you and I can do freely. There are 34% of the cities that have, bans on standing in public spaces if you are experiencing homelessness. And even there are some cities right now where you can be fined for sleeping in your car. Like in the state of California, there are multiple cities that have laws and ordinances where you can actually get a ticket, even if you have a job and can't afford somewhere to stay. In 2016, there were 14,000 people experiencing homelessness arrested for like sitting on sidewalks and doing everyday activities. And so when I say the word invisible, most times I'm connecting that word to the lack of understanding individuals and respecting individuals and their individual stories, right? Because just because you experience homelessness doesn't mean that you have a mental health issue or some type of substance abuse issue. There are several different ways you can experience homelessness. I mean, we know right now from research and data, there are researchers saying that this moment in COVID, because millions of people have been furloughed and laid off, that homelessness in America will rise by 41% by 2021, right?
Whoa, say
And
that
so,
again. Say that again.
well, yeah, there are articles right now and researchers saying that homelessness will rise by 41% by 2021, just from the crisis of people being furloughed, not able to make their rent or mortgage payments, or not having stable employment. And so while we look down on the experience of homelessness can happen to anyone at any given point. There are mothers who have fled domestic violence. I know, there are people right now who have lost loved ones because of COVID-19. And with that, sudden death have also lost income, right? That have been faced with many challenges. I mean, me personally, my family just lost a family member due to COVID ourselves, and we've seen the consequences of that loss, right? Which has been hard to see, our family go through certain challenges. But I'm saying all this to say when you talk about invisibility, it's, placing people who are on the margins in a bucket and discarding them or sweeping them under the auspice or the rug of labels, right? And we all know whenever you label something, you can limit it, right? And that limitation is ultimately to discard it altogether.
And for those of us that are watching, I want you to really hone in what Terence just said. Many surveyors and researchers are already predicting that homelessness, which simply means you can either be evicted, foreclosed upon, or if your building is condemned, if you suffer from a natural catastrophe, building may get flooded if you stay in an apartment, or hardly any night that you watch local news and you don't see a an apartment complex of some sort, which is ravaged by fire. And all of these and so much more are contributing factors, as you said earlier, to individuals losing the roof over their head.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, if this moment hasn't taught us anything, I think it's taught us that nothing is secure, and that we are all right. We're all one paycheck away, or one experience away from losing it all. And you would think that this moment would not only provide the type of awareness that causes heart change and perspective shifts, but it would cause a deep sense of compassion and empathy for neighbor. I know you're a minister and a pastor, but when I hear people of faith talk about who is neighbor, in context, neighbor is someone who is totally different from you, who doesn't look like you, walk like you, or come from the same context. It's easy to love someone who is similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't measure love when you're loving something that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
You can only measure that by loving something that is totally opposite of you. That's how you can really measure your empathy level and your compassion level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this moment is teaching us to not only be aware of our own personal limitations, but also to build up the type of compassion that actively seeks out opportunities to serve and to affirm the dignity of neighbor.
Yeah.
And
Terence?
and this is the thing too, Long, and I'll say this: just because a person doesn't have an address doesn't mean that they're not a neighbor.
Say that again, man.
Just because you don't have an address does not mean that you're not a neighbor. Neighbor is about existence, right? And it's also about presence and proximity. And I think we oftentimes associate worth and value in this country on external things or extrinsic things, right? Sure. Who do you associate with? Who do you run with? What do you own? What are you driving? What school did you go to? What type of group do you hang with, right? And we begin to assign these very weird metrics of worth based upon all of these external things. Well, if you don't have those things, then are you worthy, right? When the real baseline and foundation of worth starts within. And if we actually leverage this idea of intrinsic worth and value and dignity, and we assign that to every living human being that has breath in their bodies, then the playing field or the is level, because that means everybody is deemed worthy. So when I look at someone who is, may have laid their head underneath a bridge, I see no difference in worth for that person versus a CEO of a company.
Yeah.
Because I'm not measuring their worth based upon their location or these extrinsic things. I'm measuring their worth based upon their very humanness and their existence, because they were created in the image of God. And I think people exclude and make other people invisible or overlook other people because they don't have those things that they have placed worth and value in, which is all of the stuff that really doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Terence, one of the things you did just a few months ago is that you journaled all of this wealth of experiences that you've seen during the crisis and before the crisis into this book. And as we were just surveying and skimming through, I really, really want to ask you about some of the things that you saw and that you experienced and that you wrote down, because I must be honest, some of them are hard to grapple with because I have not necessarily been in that circumstance. And many of us who are watching this tonight, we maybe don't have the first clue because we don't experience this day after day. But you have put into a book many of these experiences, and I just want to ask you a few questions about that, if you will.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So in this book entitled I See You, you said it like this. You said, when we are able to listen to someone else's story with an open heart and hear their experience, which may look different than ours, we began to close the gap between them and us. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I remember. I'll tell a story and I'll illustrate my point. But I remember it was years ago. We were on the streets of Atlanta, engaging with many of our friends and community members without an address, and there was an opportunity for a person to come and receive a meal. And we had this volunteer who got mad at a brother experiencing homelessness because he didn't want to receive the food. And it was almost to the point where this volunteer was like mad and angry and like being very belittling and dismissive, where you should be glad you're getting food, like really trying to put the individual down. And I saw the entire thing unfolding, and I went over to talk to the person experiencing homelessness, which is a brother and good friend of mine now. And he told me that he didn't want to partake because he was on medication and dietary restrictions. This volunteer, in their ignorance, right, only saw the outside of the individual,
Yeah.
and not necessarily getting to a chance to know the person for who he was. If this person would have taken time, she would have known he was a son, a brother, a father, someone's family member, someone who was struggling with health issues, all the while living on the streets in the middle of the winter, using most of his days to beg for money, not for drugs or alcohol, but for medication, to purchase medication, life-saving medication. And when I explained this to the volunteer, they were so ashamed, they left. They actually left. And it made me reflect on how easy it is for us to remain distant from a person. Even though you can be in their presence or close in proximity, you can still not know a person, right? And so when I say that, I'm talking about what it means to really see a person and know them. And I'm not talking about knowing based upon assumptions. I'm talking about knowing the individual for who they are. That's how we get back to the basics of forming and forging relationships. I think about the number of false perceptions that would be deconstructed or dismantled if we just took time to know people, especially as it relates to people experiencing homelessness, because there's this oftentimes weird fear of people who are living on the streets. And here's one of the myths that I always talk about, right? The myth is that people experiencing homelessness commit more violent crimes than house people, when in actuality, the fact is that people experiencing homelessness commit less violent crimes than house people do. Dr. Fisher of Johns Hopkins University actually did a study, and she studied the arrest records in Baltimore and found out that although people experiencing homelessness were more likely to commit nonviolent crimes, they were actually less likely to commit crime against a person or property. And so there are all these weird myths that is associated to not having, right? But in actuality, people who are experiencing homelessness have much more to offer than we could even imagine. We just haven't taken time to know them. But that principle applies to, any situation, man. I mean, you think about it, people are just distant from one another because they've not taken time to get a chance to know one another.
Yeah. Just got to get to know. But here's the problem, Terence, and you said this in your book, and I took note of this. You said, from the comfort of our own homes, it is hard to understand the complexities of something like poverty and homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm asked to give talks. Currently, I'm doing research around narrative formation and social constructions as it relates to policy, but also rhetoric, right?
Sure.
That you can literally create the frame of how something is viewed based upon the words that you spew or the laws or ordinances that you create. There's a narrative associated with those things, right? And oftentimes when I talk about narratives or false narratives as it relates to people experiencing poverty and homelessness, I oftentimes ask the audience in a rhetorical way, who controls the narrative?
Wow.
And in most cases, the persons that control the narrative have never been it, right? People who control the narrative of what it means to experience homelessness have never lived on the streets. People who control the narrative of what it means to be poor have never experienced missing a meal. And so there's a different reality on the other side of it, which is oftentimes left out of the dialogue. So what I mean by that is, yeah, it's easy. It's easy to live in comfort and at a distance from people who are actually suffering. And then it's even easier to blame people for sufferings that they've never come close to experiencing.
Okay.
One communicator said it this way: you can never become an expert in somebody else's story. And I think that is so true, that if we are to, be people of faith, if you're a person of faith, then you not only have to see people, but you got to get proximate enough to hear them as well, which is the hallmark of the gospel. But it's also the hallmark of what it means to be a servant leader in this time.
Yeah. Terence, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we want to talk about the very core principles of love and generosity and how all of us during this time of crisis can really help. So stay with us. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Awesome.
I want to talk to you about the stakes in this election as plainly as I can. If we're going to get this virus under control, get folks back to work, and make sure affordable health care is available for everybody, we've got to send people to Washington who aren't interested in playing political games or making themselves rich. We've got to elect folks who will get to work for people like you. That's why I'm supporting Reverend Raphael Warnock in the special election for Senate. Reverend Warnock's someone I've known for years. He's a man of great moral integrity, a leader in the truest sense of the word. He's spent his life pushing for justice, fighting to expand healthcare, protecting voting rights and the dignity of work. You don't find a lot of people in Washington like Reverend Warnock, and that's exactly why we got to get him there. Please join me in supporting Raphael Warnock for Senate.
I'm Raphael Warnock, and I know we can do better. That's why I approve this message.
Welcome back to Long Talk. You're on here tonight with the starter and executive director of Love Beyond Walls, Mr. Terence Lester, who's been talking to us on this evening here on Long Talk about seeing others who are in the position of simply not having an address for whatever their reasoning is, and how it is that you and I have unconsciously ignored them. But tonight we are raising consciousness and we're heightening our attention to really give thought and concern to those individuals. And Terence, tonight you've been doing a wonderful job of just giving us data and real life experiences that can help many of us in our approach to tackling this invisibleness that is present in the midst of this pandemic and crisis. So Terence, I wanted to ask you this before I let you go. Man, you know, you're the starter and executive director of one of the leading initiatives out here. And with your years of experience, one of the things that I've always been curious about is helping people acknowledge that there is a crisis, that there is a pandemic. And I want to ask you this. The moment that we choose to acknowledge someone in pain, right? We have to decide whether we will respond with love or generosity and or grace, or are we just going to ignore them once again? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the key word in that that line that you just said is acknowledgement, right? We have all come to the crossroads, if you will, of seeing someone in need. And need doesn't necessarily have to be physical, right? It can be emotional, it can be spiritual, it can be wherever there is lack, right?
Yeah.
And we have the choice of responding with generosity and kindness and love, or ignoring. And in many instances, sad to say, people choose to ignore. And when we choose to ignore, I mean, I just want you to think about this if you're listening. It creates more apathy in the world. It creates more numbness in the world. It creates more distance in the world. And so, one of the practices that I've tried to live is, one, by looking at the context of how I've structured my life. What I mean by this is, most times people ask me, well, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
I think the first response is to answer the question, well, what's on your plate? Because many people want to help, but not many people are available.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, people live very busy lives and they're spread thin, and they only have enough margin for small windows or events of service.
Sure.
But when you start to look at how can I reorient my life to live a lifestyle of service, that means some of the things that are on your plate that are unnecessary needs to fall away. Because if you're wanting to show up and make yourself available, then you have to create the type of margin where you can incorporate this as a rhythm. People who live with service on their mind, or at the forefront of who they are as people, or it's on their priority list, have reoriented or prioritized their life around this idea of how can I make this world less apathetic, less invisible, less distant. And that's one of the practices that, my wife and my family, we've modeled for many years. We have factored service in as a core value of who we are.
Sure.
Service is not a punishment, right? Oftentimes people use service as punishment for their children. Oh, you or taking for granted the shoes I bought you. Let me drag you down to a soup kitchen. No, service doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Service works best when it's a part of your everyday life. And then as you incorporate this mentality into your lifestyle, service can happen anywhere. It can happen in a grocery store. It can happen on your job. It can happen in community. It can happen right now because you're seeking an organization that may need you to make phone calls. You know, service can happen in any way, but it has to be at the top of your heart's priority list, which is so essential, right? We talked about what's essential. Love is essential. Service is essential. You know, there have been many arguments and debates about, you know, should we use sanitizer? Should we wash our hands? Or should we wear masks? And it's like all of these very nuanced things, but we're not asking these questions from a place of empathy and love. Because if you truly love neighbor, then you'll do whatever it takes to protect your neighbor. Does it make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Because your heart is postured for service.
Lester, you said something so powerful. Man, I'm not even sure if you know what you just said. To move it from a thought to a rhythm. Meaning that, and anybody that knows music knows rhythm happens on purpose or on beat, right? And so
Right.
it's all about the intentionality of service. Not, again, as you said earlier, where service is a benefactor of some form of prosperity
Right.
or punishment.
Or making service, you know, self-centered instead of person-centered, right? You know, most people actually do service opportunities because it's a self-centeredness approach, and it has nothing to do with those who are impacted by service. But when you use the person first or person centered approach, you remove yourself from the equation. It was the spiritual writer Henry Nouwen that talked about compassion is leaving your world to enter into somebody else's world, to dwell with them in their suffering. Right, to cry with those who cry, to mourn with those who mourn, to become weak with those who are weak. We know this language; it's derivative of, you know, Paul. But it's like we need more people with this mentality of when you actually do show up to serve, it's not to serve yourself. It's actually to walk with people who desperately need to be seen and desperately need their dignity affirmed.
Yeah.
You think about the number of hopeless people out here now, bro, like people who have homes and don't have homes, right? We need more people who feel seen, heard, and accepted. Because what I do in the book when I'm defining what home is actually a place where you feel seen, accepted, and you feel like you belong. If we just use that as the basis of what home is, not even thinking about a roof over our heads, how many people actually feel like they're accepted, they feel seen, and they belong, right?
And love.
Loved, and not many.
And Lester, what you said at the beginning of this conversation, as these numbers are projected to rise, 4 out of the next 10 people perhaps will be without an address, especially when legislation now permits those individuals to serve their form of justice on those individuals who have not been able to adequately service their expectation. What am I saying? That was the complex way of saying people who just can't afford to do it anymore. And they can't afford to do it because they've been laid off. Their job has been, it has disappeared, right? We were reading, and this isn't, and I don't want people to think that Lester, and I know you know this, We talk about individuals that may work entry-level jobs, but I was just reading a report the other day. 30% of all restaurant owners, not the waitresses and waiters. Why, yes, if the owner loses, then of course all of the service individuals. But now we're going to see 3 out of every 10 restaurants right here in our city and cities across the country close their doors. So even homelessness will even begin to affect more individuals on all economic platforms, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Again, man, I think, I think people should be more empathetic, and I think empathy is built upon the narratives that we tell ourselves about others,
Yeah.
and the narratives that we construct about people who are actually going through these experiences. It reminds me, earlier today, I was in the heart of the city, and I saw you talk about waitresses. I saw this waitress literally outside of the restaurant crying because manager had just cut her hours, and she was on the phone with, I don't know whoever it was, but it seemed to be their family member or a close friend, and she was just like yelling, "I don't know how I'm gonna pay my rent." Obviously, she was upset and used other words, but man, I mean, you just think about it. Um, you know, except for the grace of God, there go I.
There go I.
Yeah.
My God. Lester, that phrase right there got me into the rhythm many years ago of just being graceful towards those that I personally can't even help. And somebody said to me years ago, "Long, why are you always apologizing?" Because I think it's better to, bruh, I'm sorry. My sister, please forgive me. And somebody say, "You don't owe them that." Yes, I do. I owe them that because if it were not for the grace of God, the roles could change like that. Lester, we could go on and on, but tonight you have journaled this in this book, I See You. And I want to ask you tonight, when readers pick up a copy of this book, as you lay out so many stories and so many narratives, what is the true essence of what you want readers to get out of this book, I See You?
Yeah, man, there's so many. There's so much to say about it, but I would say that we're all poor in some way. There are many people who are immaterially poor, right? And there are a lot of people who are materially poor.
Mm-hmm.
And just because your impoverishment looks differently than your brother or sister, that doesn't mean that you should lack empathy.
Sure.
And that we have a God who sees us, but also sees the sufferings of others. And if we truly understand what love is all about, then that should compel us to see our neighbors as well. More than anything, man, I'm trying to push people to see other people, but also to give their lives in some way, even if it's in a small way. Not saying that you have to, go start an organization or like do something outside of your normal skill set. But what if you thought about using your skill set in a way that could provide service to others? I'll end on this story, man. There was a volunteer that used to come, and she had forged this relationship with a guy that we were working with. He had been out of touch with his family for 30 years. You imagine being, out of touch with your family for that long. She used her skill set of research and actually found this person's family just by coming 1 hour a week, spending time asking questions and using a laptop. This person's sister actually was reached, and he was able to reunite with some of his family members. I share that story because many people oftentimes ask, like, what am I supposed to do? It's not that you're supposed to become anything other than what you already are. Maybe it's just offering up in a servant's way to use what you're gifted at to possibly change someone's life and to push more empathy and compassion in the world.
Yeah. What positive effect if when the rhythm is, and I got to keep going to this because you've really touched me tonight. When we hear the rhythm, or when we see the rhythm, or when we recognize the rhythm, we get up and make a move.
Oh, yeah.
What good is a good rhythm if you don't make a move on it, right?
You got to make a move. If you're not,
move.
I mean, even water that isn't moving is called a dead sea. You know, yeah, you got to make a move.
Man, I think about that time you helped the gentleman, and man, you know, we can go on all night. You helped that gentleman with that birth certificate, and getting that Social Security card, and helping him to see the tremendous impact that if someone takes just a little time and help somebody on how we can really make a person who, and when you did that initiative, I never realized how vital the term we use, vital records, are.
Yeah.
I always wondered why they name it vital records, but you were so, you know, you and your staff were so instrumental in teaching thousands of people how invisible you are if you don't even have a birth certificate or a Social Security card.
Yeah, and I have to shout out a group called Mini City right now. They are leveraging technology. They've created an app to expedite the access to vital records for people experiencing homelessness. And
Wow.
if you don't know, if you are without an address and without any types of proof of who you are, you actually need ID to get ID. But if you don't have ID to get ID because you don't have an address, it's kind of like a cyclical thing, right? Like if you think about it, we use thumbprints, right, to bring up your records for maybe if you committed a crime or other things, and you know, it would be even something if we use thumbprints or you know, some type of recording system that I know Mini City is working on to expedite those things. But yeah, it took securing a lawyer for many individuals we've actually worked with we had to write letters, and the lawyer had to solicit, you know, hospital or birthplace or origin. And sometimes that process just to get one document can take 8 months just to secure a birth certificate. And if you don't have identification, you can't do anything. You can't cash a check, you can't open a bank account, you can't drive, you can't get a job, right? You can't have a house, you can't put bills in your name. I mean, you literally are in a holding pattern.
You're
real.
invisible.
Yeah, you're invisible.
Which takes us back to why you've written this book, because for you and for everybody that will pick up a copy of it, it will give us key indicators on how we can actually see, or as we said earlier, just acknowledge, right? Acknowledge those who have been there all the time. Lester, thank you so much for coming on, man. I know this book is available at Amazon, but I know people can pick it up in a multiplicity of ways and places. Is it fair to say that most people can just pick this book up wherever books are sold, right?
Yeah, wherever books are sold, and if you're visiting like physical stores, specifically Barnes and Noble, I know there are copies inside of those stores as well. So,
Sure.
if you support, proceeds from this book will actually go towards, our organization and helping us to advocate more and build more relationships, ultimately to get people out of the experience. So, yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. Longtime friend and brother,
You met me when I was, believe it or not, I was homeless, right? I was just fortunate enough to have some friends that would let me sleep on their couch.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things you've helped me understand as years progress, what if I didn't have friends to let me sleep on their couch when I was experiencing my times of homelessness?
Right.
And to see what you've been able and what your staff and everybody over at that great team at Love Beyond Walls, what you all have been able to do for, again, I say countless. We can't sum it up by saying thousands or tens of thousands. There have been so many people, whether they've received food or clothing or vital records or being able to wash their hands or having something for their children to do or receiving a backpack or school supplies or remember one time you were doing things with shoes. You've been doing things, man. That's the problem when you know somebody for a long time. I got the full resume, Doc. I got the full resume. How you've done just helping people with washing their clothes. We were so ignorant. We didn't know. We thought everybody could just go to a wash house. But how you leveraged many individuals to help individuals just long before a pandemic sanitize when they had no way to sanitize their own garments and clothing. And to watch what you've done over in the College Park area, and I know we say Atlanta, but that Dignity Museum is countless amounts of individuals have now been able to get a real in-your-face look. Talk to us real quick. I know we got to go. Talk to us about that Dignity Museum real quickly.
Yeah, it's basically an immersive experience that gives people a chance to see the other side of what it means to experience homelessness. It was born out of this sheer passion to create more empathy, but also to educate people about these realities that sometimes can be conflated with false narratives, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, we launched last year. Currently it's on pause because of proximity issues, but yeah, we had 6,000 plus people come through. We were actually scheduled to take it to Georgia Tech right before everything shut down. It was we was featured at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. About human rights as it relates to what it means to experience homelessness. Man, we've used it to educate students. We've had other organizations come through to do diversity and inclusion training with it. It's a unique space in that it is housed in a shipping container, and the idea behind that was shipping containers are like people experiencing homelessness. Every shipping container has a story, an origin story. Every shipping container moves around from place to place, and every shipping container carries something, and it's just like the experience of homelessness. You move around from place to place, you have a story, but that does not mean you don't have something on the inside of value. And there's a lot of parallels, and so people get a chance to go in and experience this and walk away with some of their questions answered and some of their false narratives deconstructed. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, again, Terence, thank you so much. And I just want to say to everybody who's watching tonight, you can connect with Terence at I am Terence Lester, or I'm Terence Lester. Every day he's sharing just another candid reality of what's transpiring in our world. And so connect with him, whether you do it on Instagram or Twitter. You can reach him at I'm Terence Lester. Follow him, and then, of course, from there, I'm sure you can go also to Love Beyond Walls. Again, he's the starter and executive director. You can see just a full display of what he does there. But tonight, please go and follow Terence at I'm Terence Lester and connect with him, okay? All right. Terence, again, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you, bruh. And,
thank you, man.
Man, I appreciate, and I speak on behalf of all of the invisible people in the world. We appreciate you for what you're doing.
Thank you, bro.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, peace.
Friends, tonight we're so grateful that that we've had this meaningful dialogue. It has really been transformative. I have really gained so much from this conversation. I trust that you have as well, that we must simply acknowledge. That's all we're asking. Not asking you to empty your pockets. Not asking you to quit your job and take up what Terence is doing and he and his staff. But what we are simply saying tonight, just acknowledge. We're in the midst of a crisis. More people are hurting than in any given time in modern history. And we're coming up on the holiday season. And just to see how so many are even responding to many initiatives that people like Terence and others we've had on before, whether it's food drives and food pantries and clothing closets and rent assistance and mortgage assistance and so many initiatives to help us in our times of crisis. But simply tonight, we engage you in this long talk to simply acknowledge the old saying on the street is still true. Fit in where you fit in. Do what you got to do to help somebody. Because if you ignore it, you heard it earlier, you increase the amount of apathy that's already present. So please, when you hear it, when you see it, and when the rhythm is established, you begin to become more conscious about what's going on in and around you. And when you see it, and when you acknowledge it, see what you can do. Maybe you can't meet the entire need. Maybe you can meet a portion of it. The other old saying is true. Something is better than nothing. So we admonish you to do that, all right? All right. Remember to stay connected with us, whether you do it here on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or even YouTube. We appreciate you for connecting with us. Thank you so much. Continue to do that. I want to also remind you that on this week, we've only got 3 days remaining, so please get out and vote. We've only, again, have 3 days until the 30th, so I need you to get out and vote. If you're in a state that takes advantage of early voting, please do that for us, okay? All right, and then Thursday night, we're going to be right here again at 7:30. With a master business strategist. Dr. Felicia Phillips is going to be with us. She's going to be talking about taking all of those ideas that you have and that I have and making sure that we go ahead and do something about that. All right? All right. Great. Thank you again, and we appreciate it. All right. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and God bless you. And we'll talk again real soon here on Long Talk.
Follow us on Facebook at Daunta A. Long. Follow us on Instagram at Daunta Long. Follow us on YouTube at Daunta A. Long. Thank you for tuning in to Long Talk.